Nobody.
Jaylen Brown.
Your superstars have off games.
Follow us on social media at the Celtics Talk Weekly. What's going on, everybody? And welcome into Celtics Postgame Live, kind of Postgame Live. I am your host, Rob Hayte, and I'm with my two co-hosts, Ian Angelo and Seamus Zarlingo, aka Celtics Every Day. And we have you guys covered here for a little double header. I guess you could call us a little Celtics postgame conversational Celtics pregame conversations. The Celtics take down the Milwaukee Bucks in Game 7, and they advance to play the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics beat the Bucks 4-3 in what was a thriller of a best-of-7 game series, guys. Now, we have definitely a lot to dive into. Obviously, news breaking between Smart, Horford. Our plan was to talk more so about Game 7, but it's going to be hard to with that news breaking literally as we went on air. But Ian, I'm here to ask you first. The Celtics, right? A lot of questions come into that Bucks series, right? But how did the Celtics necessarily beat the Bucks? What did they do better than Milwaukee?
Honestly, they hit their threes. Like, that was pretty much it. I mean, if you think about it, Milwaukee's entire game plan defensively was, we're just going to let them shoot threes. You know, we're going to let Grant Williams beat us in Game 7. And if he beats us, he beats us. And he beat them. And wasn't there, I don't know if we posted it or it was someone else that posted it, the Celtics had I think it was 50 more threes than the Bucks in the entire series. I mean, at that point, there was just no way the Bucks could come back. And Grant Williams just got hot at the right time in Game 7 and just put on a masterclass of beating the Bucks. So I feel like hitting their threes and, you know, just putting as much pressure on Giannis as they could. They weren't going to 100% stop Giannis, but, you know, they did the best they could with, you know, what you really can do against the best player in the world.
Yeah, Ian said quite well there. The Milwaukee Bucks, the whole series, they essentially went, okay, Tatum, Brown, Smart, Derek White, whoever has the ball in their hands, you're not getting anything inside the paint. Al Horford, Robert Williams, you're not getting anything inside the paint. Every single time Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum would drive to the hole, there'd be Giannis, there'd be Brook Lopez sitting there on the back end, not flaring out and contesting those corner threes, but rather staying home at the rim and helping on those drives. And obviously whoever was Tatum, whether it was Wesley Matthews or Jrue Holiday, they were there as well. And the whole series, it was about the Celtics kicking out to open shooters and making those open shots. Look at the entire series, and the Celtics went insane from three-point. There's only one game in which they did not hit 10 3-pointers, and in that game they hit 9 3-pointers. And, of course, in Game 7 came their highest three-point number, 22 threes made in Game 7. And not only were those 22 threes made, but a lot of those were wide open shots. And we said after Game 2, will the Celtics be able to beat the Milwaukee Bucks shooting threes from the perimeter? Will they be able to sustain their level of success from the perimeter? And that answer throughout the series was yes, they were, because on the other end of the floor, obviously we know the Boston Celtics, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. Once they slowed Milwaukee down and forced them to play in the half court, Milwaukee's offense became very one-dimensional and very predictable. It was Giannis driving towards the hole and them trying to find shots on the perimeter with no other creator like a Chris Middleton out there to really get the job done and hit a bucket when they needed it. And so in the series with the Bucks, it was really the same theme throughout most of the series. And I felt as if after Game 4, really, when we came back, that we Milwaukee Bucks' number, because in Game 5 you saw we played well for 40 minutes of that game, blew it at the end, and then in Game 6 and Game 7 it was really just a barrage from the perimeter, while the Milwaukee Bucks, it felt like it was really Giannis 1-on-5 for most of those two games, and they just didn't have enough at the end of the day. And that's ultimately why the Celtics came out with the series and are now sitting in the Eastern Conference Finals, and really they're 4 wins away now from punching their ticket to the NBA Finals. But going into the Miami series is going to be a very different look from the Milwaukee series.
Yeah, I think if I look at what Boston did versus what Milwaukee did, is I think Boston made a little bit better adjustments. I think Budenholzer and the Bucks and that crew, they stuck to their original game plan, which is you're not getting anything inside. And I think you saw the Celtics struggle with that through games 1, 2, and 3. Shots weren't necessarily falling at a rate that we thought they were going to fall. But the Celtics made adjustments, and you know what else the Celtics did? Role players stepped up. We saw in that game 7, Grant Williams 27 points, Peyton Pritchard 14 points. Like, you weren't seeing that out of Milwaukee, and that's something I tapped into before the series started. Was I don't know if Milwaukee has someone who can consistently step up because of the absence of Chris Middleton in a 7-game series and perform at a level that's going to help them beat the Celtics team. So I think that was honestly the biggest thing in this series, was that this every game for Boston, it was someone new stepping up, whether it was game 6 Jason Tatum and his 46-point performance, or it was Al Horford in game 4 putting up 30 and willing us to a win, or Jaylen Brown in game 2. It felt like it was someone new every night. And I don't think you have that with the Milwaukee Bucks, especially with the absence of Chris Middleton. So I really do think the Celtics, for what I thought was a team that did not have a lot of depth, I thought we were really only 6 men deep. I guess you could consider us 7 with how Grant's been playing, especially. But guys like Pritchard and now Derek White are starting to step up in a big time role, and I think that was the real factor of us being able to beat Milwaukee pretty handedly in that game 7, guys.
Yeah, in a playoff series, most of the time, the others, we hear Shaq mention this all the time when he mentions the others, the role players. Those are the players who ultimately decide a series at the end of the day. And sometimes, of course, star players can outperform other star players, like we saw in that Phoenix-Dallas series. Luka clearly better than Devin Booker in that series, especially near the end. But a lot of the time, star players can cancel themselves out. Jason Tatum and Giannis, you think about those two guys in game 6. Giannis goes for 44, Jason Tatum goes for 46, and that they almost cancel their out in a sense. And at that point, it's all up to the role players and the other guys to step up, score points, and make their impact on a game, and, of course, decide a series. In Game 7, that was Peyton Pritchard, and, of course, that was Grant Williams. Grant Williams hitting 7 of 18 threes. Let me repeat this again. He took 18 three-pointers, folks, 18 threes in Game 7. For them to hit at the rate they did in Game 7, and, of course, Peyton Pritchard, I believe he had 12 points. Grant Williams had 27. You think you're getting 39 points out of Peyton Pritchard and Grant Williams in a Game 7? That can swing an entire game when those two guys who are the non-stars, who are the role players, who often earlier in the season, they were giving us 4, 5, 6 points a night. In Game 7, they give us 39 points between the two of them. And when those guys can step up and swing a game like that, that can make all the difference. And that is part of the reason why the Celtics' own championship aspirations this year, is because those other guys on the roster they have fit into their role perfectly and ultimately can come through in these big moments when they need them. And Game 7 was the perfect testament to that, with Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard stepping up. Derek White didn't hit his shots either, or didn't hit his shots, but I thought he was pretty big in that game defensively. And you look at other guys too on the roster. Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart had Marcus Smart game. You don't want him doing too much. It wasn't all that efficient, but he had the perfect game. Jason Tatum didn't have to do a ton in that game. And Jaylen Brown, of course, was efficient as well. So you look at this entire team and just go, wow, they have the talent from 1 to 8, 1 through 9 to actually go the distance. And that was on full display in Game 7.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you look at that Bucks-Celtics matchup, that's the one thing people were saying was Giannis. And I think that hell of a series that Giannis had. He was unstoppable. We threw everything we had at him. The best defensive team in the league really gave him the best game I think we could have defensively every single game, but he had his way. And I think we did a great job though, saying kind of did the same thing against Brooklyn. it's not going to be Giannis. So if Giannis is going to get his, then we're going to make sure no one else is going to get anything else. And I think that's what the Celtics did. They had times where Drew Holiday would go on these little stretches where he would, give up 10, 15 points, and then he'd kind of go cold. Seamus, you said it best. Drew Holiday is the 5 for 15, 33% player. It kind of looks like every time you look at the box score, that's what he's doing. And I just think the Celtics just overcame adversity a little bit better. I think that after that, this really should have been, in my opinion, a 6 or 5 game series. The only game Milwaukee really should have won, in my opinion, is game 1. They outplayed us game 1. Game 3, we were winning in that third quarter, and we just had a third quarter collapse. And if there was half a second left on that clock, we're going into overtime. And then game 5, we outplay them for 42 minutes of that basketball game, and we just let it collapse in the last 6 minutes. So obviously, that's no excuses, but I think that's just the nature of playing the championship. The reigning NBA champs is they're going to bend and not break, and that's what you saw out of the Bucks. I don't know if you'll see that out of the Miami Heat. With that being said, though, guys, we talked about how the Celtics beat the Bucks, how they successfully pulled off that series, right, Ian? Now, the question that I want to know is, now, how are the Celtics going to beat the number 1 seeded Heat? Obviously, we're going to get into Smart, we're going to get into Horford later on, but assuming for the majority of this series we are fully healthy, how do the Celtics come away and knock off the 1 seed?
Honestly, truthfully, I think it comes down to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown on the offensive side of the ball, because we know that Boston's defense and Miami's defense, they're both 2 of the best defenses in the NBA. I mean, I think they were 1 and 2 this year. That's how good they are. And I think it's going to be really important for the Celtics that Jason Tatum has a really good series, because I mean, there's times where I think Miami can maybe neutralize the Celtics offense in a way. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I feel like there are, ways that they can do that. And, obviously, tonight we don't have Horford and Smart, but, if you're without these guys for other games, then it's going to be super important that Tatum and Brown step up. And honestly, I feel like, that's going to be the most important thing, is that we need to find our offense. And, the guys like Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard and Derek White need to hit their shots as well if Celtics want to find any success moving forward.
Yeah, in this Miami series, the biggest question is undoubtedly going to be the Celtics' ability to create open shots and hit those open shots at the same rate, or somewhere around the same rate, because, of course, we saw just a ridiculous rate of three-pointers from the Celtics in the Milwaukee series. Because you look at the last couple of matchups, the real matchups against the Miami Heat, you go back to the bubble in 2020, that team is, of course, very different, but there were similar characteristics to Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Marcus Smart running in that offense with Kemba Walker and Gordon Hayward. Then you go to last year, and, of course, the Celtics, they play a couple of terrible games against Miami last year. Outside of that one, they won Peyton Pritchard that game winner down in Miami on January 6th. And then this year, in that one game that both rosters were healthy for, which was the game in late March, other than Robert Williams being up, all of these games had a theme, and that was the Celtics offense slowing down the stretch and becoming very stagnant. We do not want to see a Celtics offense like we saw in Game 5 against the Bucks late in that game. That game was a perfect game for the Celtics all the way up until the last couple of minutes. The Celtics went, all right, let's run out the clock. Let's run ISO plays. Let's get Jason Tatum going in isolation in the mid-range. Let's get Jaylen Brown going in the mid-range. That was just not the formula to win that game. And, of course, we lost Game 5, but that cannot happen in this series against the Heat, because the Heat are so good at forcing guys to that action because of their versatility and because of the different looks that they're going to throw at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and, of course, Marcus Smart as well. And so in this series, the Celtics have to keep the ball moving the entire time. They have to drive aggressively to the rim. They have to cut hard. And, of course, they have to make their open shots. That's the most crucial part. You can have all these wide open threes, but if you don't make them, what's the sense in getting all those open shots? But you have to take those open shots. And in this series, the Celtics offense to me is going to be the main question, because if they can find their offensive rhythm, if they can find a niche in Miami's defense, they're going to win this series. They have more offensive firepower than Miami, but if it becomes a sludge fest of a series where this pace is slowed down and both teams, it becomes a rock fight between both teams defensively, that is when Miami can own an advantage because they are taking away part of why the Celtics are so good. The Celtics are so good because of how good they are, both defensively and offensively. Offensively is really what, made this Celtics run. We saw how good they were defensively at the start of the season, but offensively is really what made the Celtics run. And in this Miami series, the Celtics ultimately have to be better offensively than the Miami Heat to actually pull out this series and go and punch their ticket to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I think I look at this series, both phenomenal defensive teams. I look at Miami and I see a 1 through 5 lineup that can also switch everything. They don't have many weaknesses defensively. Obviously, Duncan Robinson is one of them, but he has not been in the rotation throughout the playoffs. And if he is, that's going to make our offensive life a lot easier. But I look at this series and I'm assuming what I'm going to see out of Miami is all eyes on Jason Tatum. They're going to make sure they're going to try to make Jason Tatum as uncomfortable as possible. They're going to make it as hard for him as they can possibly make it. You know what Spoelstra is capable of doing. You know Jimmy Butler's phenomenal on defense, Bam Adebayo, right? So credit goes to them. So when I look at this series, my eyes shift to Jaylen Brown. I don't think the Heat will be able to successfully stop both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Now, it's one thing if Brown his jumper's off or he's having an off night. But I think that if Jaylen Brown is aggressive in getting to the hoop, the Heat will not be able to constantly have eyes on Jason Tatum because Jaylen Brown, if you aren't focused on him for 48 minutes, he could walk in there and give you 40. And I think that's the ticket to the NBA Finals is Jaylen Brown. I think that it's going to be tough for Miami to combat both of those guys. And then on the defensive end for the Celtics, I think it's about just playing their game. Obviously tonight, game one, we're going to be without Smart and Horford, 2 starters. So that means White and Derek White and Grant Williams step into the starting lineup. And hell, you might even see some Aaron Nesmith tonight because of how thin this lineup is. We're really running 7 guys, and Pritchard and Tice are off the bench for us. And those defensively are they're not 2 of our strong suits. So I wouldn't be shocked if you saw Aaron Nesmith. Celtics have to play with that next man up mentality for games 1 and most likely games 2, as Horford will most likely miss both of these road games in Miami. However, guys, let's dive into that. Obviously, Marcus Smart foot and Al Horford health and safety protocols are both ruled out for game 1. Horford was seen on during shoot around and was pulled back and told he will be out. Robert Williams, however, is active and will be playing significant minutes tonight in Miami, as Woj just reported as we speak. And for Marcus Smart, his MRI came back clean on his foot. However, there was hope he would be ready for game 1, and he is not active tonight, guys. Like we said, no Smart, no Horford. That means Derek White and Grant Williams, they got to step into the lineup. What do they need to do tonight in order for the Celtics to snag this game 1 win? Mind you, Boston, they played a game 7. It was kind of a lighter game 7, not going to lie. Not a lot of energy was put into that in that second half. We kind of breezed and walked to that win, guys, right? But what is Grant, and more specifically, my eyes point to Derek White. What do they have to do tonight to be successful for the Boston Celtics?
They have to make their shots. Sorry, Seamus.
No, go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say they have to hit shots. They have to hit shots. Now, Derek White's defense is incredible. He can literally impact a game and not hit a shot the entire game. And in game 2, when we didn't have Marcus Smart, I'm not 100% sure his box score, but I think he did hit a couple shots, or maybe that was the game where he went like 0 for 6 and he was still like a plus 22 or something like that. But yeah, Derek White, I think he needs to step up just a little bit offensively and just play Marcus Smart's role as best as he can. And Grant Williams, I mean, I can't stress how important Grant Williams has been to the Celtics. And honestly, Grant Williams being in the starting lineup is something that I'm really not against anyway. So if he can continue playing the way that he's playing, he can keep hitting his wide open shots. He can, play the best defense that he can when it comes to them being switched on Bam or, anybody else on Miami. So I think it's going to be super important for those two to hit their shots offensively and just play the best, just play the best roles they can defensively at this point. So.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Miami does with Derek White out there tonight, because Derek White, we all kind of know that teams want him to shoot. He was 10 in Game 7, 1 of 6 from three-point land, but we all know Derek White can also bring the intangibles to the floor defensively, as a ball mover, as a playmaker, as an aggressive driver, offensively. And you, as the Celtics, you still feel comfortable with him in the starting lineup or in the lineup, period. But it's interesting to see what Miami will actually throw at them in terms of leaving him open. You think that potentially Miami is going to pack the paint as well against the Celtics and leave a guy like Derek White open on the perimeter, but that can be a slippery slope because you have other guys, Williams, Peyton Pritchard, who can sit out there in the corner on the wing and hit open three. So it's going to be interesting what actually happens in that regard. But both guys, Ian said it best, they need to make shots. Ultimately, Derek White, he has to show up defensively, and he has to be that playmaker tonight that Marcus Smart, we've seen from him so many times this season. And we've talked about it a lot too. Derek White and Marcus Smart, they're almost like the same type of player. You don't want them doing a ton offensively. Marcus Smart might be a little more talented offensively, but you don't want these guys doing a ton offensively, and you want them focusing defensively, and that's what Derek White has to do tonight. And Grant Williams, on the other hand, he has to make threes, and he has to, of course, this has to be a physical series for Grant Williams. Last series against Giannis, there's no doubt he went to bed a couple of times, some bruise across his chest, wherever on his body, because against Giannis. But this is going to be no different going up against Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker really is the mold for Grant Williams, and he's going up against those guys, super physical players who will demand physical play out of Grant Williams this entire series. This Miami Heat team, people talk about Heat culture and all that good stuff, but they are a team that stay in shape and grinding down opponent. Williams is going to be the guy who has to face that for most of the series, so he has to stay physical. And of course, like Ian said, like I said, Grant Williams also has to hit shots along with Derek White opportunities this series.
Yeah. Now, I think in the playoffs, something you got to look at is matchups. That is when you got injuries, and even when you're healthy, matchups are the number one thing. If you match up well against a team in a 7-game series and you're in the playoffs, you have a shot at it. Whether you're the 8th seed, whether you're the 7th seed, right? That's just how it is. And I look at how the Celtics match up with the Miami Heat, and obviously it's not ideal that Smart and Horford are out. And I'm more talking about Al Horford here. Daniel Tice matches up pretty well against the Miami Heat. Obviously, Bam has had his way, or had his way in the bubble in 2020 on Tice. However, I look at the Celtics starting five, and I think that they, especially with Lowry out, they match up better than them with positions 1 through 4. 1 through 4. I think that Robert Williams can do his thing in containing Bam. I just really think tonight it's next man up mentality. I would love, honestly, to see some Aaron Nesmith maybe in a game 1. I do think it's going 7-man deep with only having 1 day break in between game 7, and you only have a day break in between games 1 and 2. I think an 8-man rotation is where you want to sit at. And if you could slide Aaron Nesmith in, I think Nesmith, I know he hasn't been called upon in the playoffs, but I think that guy can hold his own out there in a game 1 in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know. Like I said, it's just going to be next man up mentality. You're going to need Pritchard to knock down some shots. My eyes shift to Jason Tatum. It's on you tonight, right? Obviously, it's only a game 1. You're on the road. This is a game where Miami should technically win. Boston coming off of only a day break. Miami's had 3 or 4 days off to get ready and prepare for either team, whether it was Boston or Milwaukee. But listen, Tatum, if you want to make the NBA Finals, if you want to be that guy that you've been proving to be, Mr. 46 points in an elimination game, which people are not talking about enough, quite frankly. That's historic in my opinion against Giannis Antetokounmpo. Different topic for a different day though. But that my eyes shift to you. Like, you got to have this game where you come in and you will the Celtics to a win, because if you want to have a successful series against this number 1 seeded Miami Heat team, you have to, in my opinion, steal one at the road, steal one of these first 2 games on the road, so you can come back to Boston feeling like you're not in a deep hole, and it's a level playing field back in Boston. And I look at Derek White tonight too. It's Tatum and White, obviously Jaylen Brown and everyone, but I think White has got to step up in the absence of Marcus Smart, both defensively and in the playmaking category. But as an overall, for a 48-minute basketball game, I would not be shocked if Tatum was in there for 44 minutes. I would not be shocked if Tatum put up a nice little 40-piece tonight either, because it's going to have to be the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum show. And I hope it can be, as the Celtics tip off a super late tip, guys, against the Miami Heat. That's at 8:30. Tip off is probably around 8:45 if it's on TNT, right? Is TNT usually start late, or is that ESPN?
No, that's ESPN. ESPN starts like 10 minutes later than scheduled.
TNT's been pretty good.
I think it's on ABC tonight, though.
You know what? I think you're right. I think it's on ABC from here on out, right?
Yeah, that's right, because it is on ABC.
So it's on ABC from here on out. Every game this series is an 8:30 start, which actually
ESPN,
sucks.
or whatever.
ESPN, yeah, same difference.
Whatever.
But it's a big one, guys. Come back here. Obviously, this was an abnormal post-game, whatever you want. This is a little throwback. Hopefully, this whole little pregame vibes don't throw us off, because we had not been successful with the little pregame stuff we did earlier in the season. But the Celtics look to take game 1 here in the best of 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, guys. We are 4 games away from the NBA Finals in the road. The real season starts tonight in Miami, as the Celtics will look to beat the 2 years ago reigning Eastern Conference champions in the bubble. A little rematch, guys. So we'll have you covered back here for a post-game show after game 1, right after the final buzzer sounds. I believe Justin will be with us, who is the host over there for the post-game show, guys. However, that does it for a little Abnormal Live. Hope you guys have a good one, and let's go Celtics.